How's it going, everybody?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Cool.
Let's see.
Start
There's
off the
that.
day.
Boogity boogity. Grab that. You do have a magnificent beard.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
Yours is pretty epic too. So you've got the
Thanks.
stash to go with it.
Yeah, I've been trying to get the stash to go with it. All right. So, welcome to the Age of Protocol meeting today, October 24th. We've got a couple of things to talk about and some big discussions, I think, is the biggest thing on the agenda here. How are y'all doing today overall?
Good.
Doing good.
Good.
Excited about a
Um,
meeting.
say what?
I'm excited about it. I'm feeling good.
Awesome. So, first we got some discussion topics. The additional input versus config. We've talked in the past about renaming additional input to config, and then potentially in a future info endpoint option defining what would go into the config for an agent. Sasha thinks that we should keep additional input as the name additional input, but the config defining what that config looks like would still be sort of on the table in the future. What do y'all think about some sort of concept of that? Like instead of renaming it for keeping it as additional input.
Is that to the task or to the step?
For both actually, because so we've discussed before about removing input from the task, but I think the general consensus is that the task should also create a step at the same time, and so removing the input or the from the task would separate that. So then you'd be posting a task that has no information other than just holding steps, right? Versus the um, uh, versus posting input to this task, which sort of labels it in a way. I don't know.
I sort of feel like that. I think I've brought this up a couple of times. That I feel like that you want a mechanism to where you can execute a task all in a single call, a single turn,
Right.
right? So there's a difference between single turn task and multi-turn task. And by that, I mean, like, every defining what a turn is. Typically, when we're talking about conversational experiences, a turn is one back and forth. Like I tell you something, you say something back to me. That's a turn. And so in this case, we can think of it as, one call to the agent, right? Ideally, you want to basically be able to, in one call, start the task, do the step in the task, all in a single turn, right? Whereas right now, what you have now is you have a mechanism that requires me to make at least two calls, one to create the task, one to execute the first step, and then it can say it's done, right? So ideally, you would combine those two.
Right. And one of the things too
So
is that
I don't know what your thoughts are about that, but
one of the things that I've seen too is that it goes, you go create the task, and then you've created the task, and then you create the step, and then the step executes, and you get back the step, and then you do the next step, and it's not an autonomous system like that, kind of,
yeah.
because of the client to server interaction going back and forth like a ladder all the way down to finally the is last statement.
Yeah, the
And
multi-step thing, you still want to support that, right? But I'm just saying that from an efficiency perspective, ideally, you could make a single call uh, uh, to create the task and do the first step. That's not what you have right now. So working in the kind of the confines of like how the current protocol works, um, I'm still not sold on the need for additional input at all. I'm trying to work through actually for me. I mentioned this in the Discord last night whenever I was chatting with John. It's that the LLM has this great ability to act as a transformer for you. So like basically if you think about executing like a command like get the weather, right? That step should get the weather. It needs to return that value to the LLM, and then the LLM needs to reason over it so that it can decide how to parameterize the next thing that it wants to do. It's either going to call like something to tell the user what the weather is, or it's going to decide to execute another function, and it wants to transform the output of that previous step and pass it into the next step. What I'm trying to work out in your protocol is who's driving the logic of what the next step is, because it sort of feels like the way that you've got the protocol coded, that as the orchestrator, the person that's calling do step, do step, do step, do step, I'm not the one that's actually determined whether or not like there are more steps to do. It's the other side of the equation that is trying to decide that. And if that's the case, then
The other side being the agent, or are you talking about the caller?
yeah, the agent or the tool. I'm just trying to figure out like where's the like I would really love to see a couple of examples of two agents talking with each other using this protocol, because that will help inform me. Uh, uh, and that's probably on me. I just haven't had time to go through all your code.
Yeah.
I've got a big deadline coming up for my own code here, so I've been pretty heads down working. But I would really like to just see what the back and forth is, because that'll really help inform me as to uh, uh, like where the decision making part of things is happening in that. Because if it's on the caller side that the caller is actually reasoning as to like what to pass the next step, then I feel like that you need the additional info. That was a long-winded way of saying I don't know that I would get rid of it yet, but I'm still not convinced. I'm still trying to understand just what the typical relationship is between the caller and the callee.
Yeah, there was a RFC that was proposed on the Agent Protocol repository 3 days ago by someone named CDU-GE, and
Okay.
it the proposal is a enhanced interface specification for protocol, and I'm looking at that as issue 75, and I can link that into the
Yeah, please do.
into the Agent Protocol channel here. And this is meant, I think, to be much more detailed conceptually of where this task step relationship would go, and like the flow
Okay.
of it.
Yeah, that's great. I'll look at that.
I am curious because I haven't had a chance to really go into it in depth, but it looks like it goes pretty far into that concept. So yeah, that I wanted to bring
Okay.
that up because I do want to see what your opinion is on that, and I need to
Yeah,
read
and in
some
fairness, like I'm hesitant to give too many concrete opinions just simply because I haven't built anything with the protocol yet, and so I
right,
don't feel like you can do anything until you built something with it, right? So
right. That's actually why I wanted to talk about this
yeah,
Waggle Dance implementation notes that popped up earlier this morning. John, you were the one talking about that, right?
Yep, that's me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had some thoughts directly relating to what we were just talking about with the additional input. And this may not be true, but it seemed, I came to the conclusion that for my system, like for instance, each task and even each step can have different configuration. So it could be running on a different LLM, for example. That's probably, we'll just leave it at that. Like you can have kind of different parameters that the orchestrator or the client, whatever you want to call it, is sort of doing its own logic and determining. And so, yeah, the only way I could figure out how to do that and still be working within the confines of the protocol is to use additional input. And then you're just working with like I guess the main problem for me is if I want to go and call some conforming some other agent that somebody else has written, I have to then go look at what they expect for additional input, and it's just kind of a bag of data versus something that is in their open API spec or something like that.
Yeah, that's
So
because it's not typed, right?
that was
So
something
those
that
steps
was
aren't
something
typed.
that we had talked about because we were going to implement the info endpoint. So it'd be AP/v1/agent/info, and that would have information for a client to access, like name and version of the agent and version of the protocol and stuff like that. But it would also go over config options, and that config options was the big thing because that would type the additional input into, here's the schema that we're using for this. You have model, and then the options for model could be GPT 3.5 or 4, or something along those lines. So then those options, you could parse that and have that ready to go without it being just a jumble of messy data all over the place. That was kind of the concept, but that probably won't happen until we do like a v2 release kind of thing of the protocol. But it's one of those things that I think could help everything out a lot.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Having something like that is useful. I just wanted to also make sure, like for instance, I had to make an endpoint to change basically the base URL of the open API spec. So I just downloaded, the JSON that you all have. And then on my server, I'm rewriting the URL so it points to my base URL, which can change.
Mm-hmm.
What was I going to say next? So yeah, it could be really nice to, like, if every agent has to publish their open API spec, you could add extensions to it that sort of define things like additional input or config directly in the spec. So it's sort of like a fork with extensions added for each agent.
Right.
Is how I would think about it.
And
And then, yeah, sorry.
as far as extensions to the spec goes too, we've talked about having that be like this plugin system that we could use in the near future. I think that's one of the big things that people want a lot is the ability to extend the spec in some way and have it be standardized within the protocol so that any extensions that you do create can be implemented on a client easily in some way. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm not an open API expert by any means, but I came across this last night and it just like seems like if there's things existing that we can just reuse, that would be pretty ideal because then you get all the tooling that comes with it.
Yeah.
And then one kind of, and maybe this is just conceptually different in my head right now, but let me find my notes. So yeah, the main issue I had was there's no way to scope tasks. So this sort of assumes that one server equals one agent, I think,
Right.
which for my it's not true for my case.
So you
So I
have
would have to
multiple
use
agents, and one of the
yeah,
concepts
and
with
like
this,
multiple
yeah.
users that are you can have multiple windows open that are running like separate tasks, like entirely logically separated um, concurrently. I didn't see a good way to do that other than maybe passing in some extra parameters, which is kind of defeats the point.
So on that, we've talked about being able to support multi-agent systems in the past, and I think one of the bigger things from this is a side effect of having it be enforced all the way to the root, which means that the only thing that can change before this point is maybe the port or something like that. So you could run multiple agents, but you'd have to run port 8000, port 8001, port 8002, something like that. That could be a potential solution. How it is now, having a different IP address, obviously, but that's running it in a totally different container or something along those lines. And being able to have some kind of way to run multiple agents in a single server definitely does make sense. Um, and I think that we've discussed having that somewhere. There may have been a issue talking about that concept, but if not, then we should definitely create one because that seems useful. I've definitely seen the slash agents concept floating around somewhere, which might help with that. But yeah,
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of ways you could tackle that. Like even in the current protocol, um, if you had some form of manifest, right, or extension to the OpenAI manifest, right, where the agent could just simply define like here's my root address, and then it's just a protocol off of that root address, right? So you then assume, right? They say I'm at example.com/agent3, right? But then you assume the protocol is everything after that root URL, right? So
yeah,
that's kind of what we do in the bot framework. Whenever we send a activity to a bot, we include in it this URL called a service URL, and that's basically the address where the user should post their responses back to, right? And then that could be anything. So like on Microsoft Teams, they add a tenant ID on the end of it, right? And there's a bunch of other stuff that they put on it, but it gives you a lot of flexibility. And then it's just assumed that at that endpoint there is basically a protocol that endpoint expects to follow, right? And so there are sub URLs that we call off of that and so forth, right, to make our REST calls.
okay.
Yeah, having some kind of namespacing or like tenancy is super important, I think, for this. And I didn't see a native way to do that with the current spec.
I think that these are all things that could be implemented. With the concept of I don't think having it where the agent says, "Here's your URL here's my URL," right, and then having it after that be the agent protocol. I don't think that that works as well as enforcing it across the whole URL, if that makes sense. Like you have your address and then you have the agent protocol. Um, just because I think it makes it a little bit more complex sometimes. But the one thing is, if we had the info endpoint, right, and we were able to get the name of the agent or something along those lines, then we should be able to uh, have it where if we had, like a slash agents endpoint, we could put the name of the agent into that endpoint and you could run multiple agents within that. But how, you know,
You would want some sort of discovery protocol if you're going to go down that path,
right.
right? So there needs to be a way for you to list off the agents or at least the task. I personally am okay with it, like the concept of one agent equals one server, but to John's point, then you need to be able to enumerate all the different tasks, right? Because it shouldn't be one task to one agent. An agent should be able to say, I support these 5 tasks, right? And call me to do X, Y, Z, and so forth, right? Okay, because I also feel like that whenever we think about a server per se, there's a trust boundary there that you're trying to think about as well too, right? And so you want to think about like, okay, um, if someone has to authenticate with that agent, does that give them access to every task on the server, or does it just give them access to one task and they have to re-auth with each task that they want? And I don't know how far you guys have gone down the path of thinking about how like authentication works between agent to agent, but you do want to establish a trust boundary there to where like what's inside of a given server, everything should be trusted.
So that authentication type stuff is exactly what the plugin system would hopefully accomplish, so that we could create extensions to the protocol that handle things like authentication. Uh,
And
so as
it's not just there's two layers of auth here that you have to think about,
right,
or you want to think about. One is the trust between the agents that are talking to each other. And then there's the trust between the agent and the user that is interacting with the agent, and that agent is delegating to another agent, right? So you have to be careful about elevation of like privileges and so forth. That like if I call John's agent server and John's server said, "Hey, is it okay for me to do some stuff on your behalf, Steve?" I trust John, but I may not trust Zane whenever John calls Zane's agent server. So you have to figure out how do you do that without elevating, privileges, without an escalation of privileges,
right.
right? So does that
That
mean
was a
like if
that was a
John
general
calls,
concept. Sorry,
yeah.
Phil.
Oh no, go ahead. I was just basically trying to clarify with an example. Like if John, if you call, Ziggy's server, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that he has rights to know my name as a user,
Right,
right? Those are the types of privileges that I'm talking
since you're giving agents context potentially, or like tools or access to data, you need to make
about.
sure that you have a well-defined permissioning scope between them, and that's something I've been
Yeah,
thinking about. I don't know. I need to look at some other systems, but I
yeah.
think it would
I'm not sure
potentially
that
make sense to add that to the
I'm
protocol.
not sure that the plugin system is going to adapt that. I feel like as part of a V2 protocol, that probably needs to be baked into the root of the protocol, right? And trust me,
Interesting.
I do not want to work on that. Auth, I hate auth. It's the last thing on the planet, but it is needed,
Yeah.
right?
But you don't think that it could work as a plugin, that it would have to be fully integrated into the protocol? Um,
I don't want
interesting.
to. I just point out the
Yeah, I
problems. I
don't
don't
know.
want
Huh.
that one. There are plenty of
It would
people
be
that
nice
love
to
think
at least
about
see
auth.
some guidance. I think some guidance or structure around it would be good. It could be a plugin. Just sort of depends how it's implemented, I think.
Somebody
I
in
don't
the
Yeah,
even know how to
past
correctly do it yet.
Somebody in the past mentioned that they thought that the auth plugin should be one that the agent protocol, the AI Engineer Foundation manages. That it wouldn't be loosey goosey. You wouldn't be able to just use any auth protocol or auth plugin. It would just be the
Mhm.
one auth plugin. So maybe we could do something like that where it still uses the plugin system, because we do need to flesh out the plugin system and what that looks like and how it would work and everything. Because that's one thing that I don't know, is conceptually, what do these things look like on paper, in code, and all that kind of stuff. And if we're extending the protocol, and then how do we use that in a client and all that kind of stuff. And um, yeah, that all that concept still needs
So
to be
I
worked
will
out.
quickly say that in the bot framework, we use this thing called job tokens.
Hmm.
And the way that we do it is actually we first establish trust between the bot and the platform that it's running on. So if your bot is um, a bot that's running in Microsoft Teams, we send you a job token that you can basically verify the signature is coming from a Teams server. So you are guaranteed that once you run through this kind of signing verification, it's basically you do a signature verification of the token, and you're verifying that the person that sent you the message is Microsoft Teams and it's not someone else that's trying to spoof you, right? Okay, that's trying to spoof me in Teams, right? So we establish first that trust between the servers, between the bot server and the team server, that's a lockdown channel, right? That no one can impersonate. The messages, you have a mechanism to verify that the messages came from that server, right? And so you would need a similar thing between like John's server and your server, you would need some form of job token that allows you to verify that the call is coming from John's server, right? And you can verify that. And there should be a bunch of protocols we can look at for how to do that. The second thing is whenever we talk about users, then we use a totally different protocol on top of that trusted channel called single sign-on, right, or OAuth, that we go through an OAuth flow where basically the user has to give permissions to that bot through a consent. There's a pop-up that they get on the screen like in Teams, and then they have to basically say, I'm okay with that bot talking about my data. And then that's a totally different token that they're working with. So there's one token that's used to secure the communication between the servers. And then there's a second token that's used to access information on behalf of the user, right? And then we support a wide range of different delegated auth protocols for that second piece of like, logging on a user. You can even bring your own auth system, and so you could have them log in at GitHub, for example, right on top of that. And then you as the user, the bot can do stuff on your behalf, use it through the GitHub protocol using the token that they acquire. But there's that two-step tokens exchange that's needed.
Yeah.
Again, I don't want to do that stuff.
Yeah. It sounds like a lot, but it always
That's a
is
lot of stuff.
with authentication and security, especially.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's going to take a lot of.
So anyway, back to the other funner subjects.
Yeah. Well, I did want to go over this the implementation notes here. John, you were talking about parallelism in this as well after the scoping concept of where it's reduced to serial. What do you think about the concept? Because I think this is something that we had talked about, Steve-O, as well in the past, was the way that tasks are executed or something along those lines, is that there isn't really any asynchronous way to do this in a large way. And where do you see that going with agent protocol and sort of that concept?
On the surface level, it was just an incompatibility between kind of my modeling and the agent protocol. But I think a lot of it could be alleviated if you just had the concept of like new agent that, or like, some boundary before task, I guess.
Okay.
And then you could just spin up multiple kind of containers of tasks that could be run parallel, and whatever the orchestrator is figuring it out. It's built into mine. So I have, I guess, like a task equivalent in my system, and then the task creates a plan, and that plan is potentially serial, but it's usually not. And yeah, I'm just having to, just because of how agent protocol works, there's no like, there's no structure to it. It's just a list that ends with is last.
Okay.
I don't really have an opinion on how it should be built, but mine is the directed acyclic graph, basically, that I have an agent come up with before even starting. So it's determining all the steps to achieve some greater task or goal, and then it creates a DAG, and that tells it how it can concurrently execute tasks, and it usually gets it right, not always with the logic of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. That I could see a DAG being really useful for making it sort of somewhat synchronous as well.
So John, are you predicting, like, is your top level orchestrator, is that guy predicting like all the steps needed to execute the plan, like multiple steps at once, or one at a time?
And then I add some constraints to it, so it's like adding review steps and things like that, but they're just another kind of task that's specialized. And another thing I'm working on is like replanning. So based on research that goes like, oh, we can't actually solve this, an agent figures that out, or it realizes it needs some user input that then significantly changes what it's doing. That's something I'm working on, and I'm not sure how that would, especially with the kind of bucket of tasks concept now, I don't see that working super easily with the protocol as it is.
Yeah, that's kind of, I mean, you know, there's classically kind of two approaches that I've seen to planning. There's a third one, which is the one that you're talking about, right? The first approach is like, you know, basically the LLM predicts all of the steps needed to execute a plan in its entirety, right? And then the framework, orchestration framework, just has to run through and execute those steps in sequence, right? And whenever it's done, it's done. The second type is more like what an auto GPT uses, which is it just is predicting the next step to run, right? And both have their pros and cons, but the system that you're talking about with replanning, there's actually a company that Microsoft bought called Semantic Machines, and this is what they do. They actually generate a multi-step plan, but then at every step of the plan, they actually run back through their large language model, and then they recalculate whether or not they should continue that program or they should rewrite the program. So they're technically rewriting the plan after every step, right? And I agree, I haven't really seen any real system outside of Semantic Machines that does a great job at the replanning part of things. My framework, I do more like what AutoGPT does. I just predict the next step to run. It seems to be the most flexible, but I could see where there's probably some value in at least trying to get a system to work that does do some replanning at some point. The tricky bit is just knowing when to do the replan. Right. So,
right. Yeah. And I have it fail some review, you know, by another LLM, which is fraught with problems as well.
yeah.
But I guess what's useful for me in having that kind of history is like you're able to detect if it's like doing a loop, basically. You could do that with AutoGPT, but you'd have to kind of keep track of it separately.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I actually gave up on getting the agent to do loops. It's not good at all.
We've also
so
in the past.
I mean, repeating the same like tasks in the same sequence over and over. I guess even if it's multiple steps.
Yeah, and that I was saying the same thing, right? You know, like I got my agent to do a loop, but the problem is that like even whenever you tell it, hey, you need to do this 7 more times, they can't count. And so like it will stop after 3, and then the next time it'll stop after 5 times, right? You know, these things aren't good at counting, right? And so
yeah, I'm explicitly I'm explicitly banning loops where I'll throw an error basically if it sees one, and any looping should be done by like a for loop in a program.
Yeah, that's what I do. So that's where I've gotten to. We're kind of at the same point, right? So I don't let the agent do any sort of looping. That has to be done. You have to call into a step. The step has to write code to do the loop, and then it can call an agent from inside of that step, right? But no LLMs trying to do looping. So.
Yeah. On the topic of replanning, there was something in the past that we had about being able to make sort of trees of tasks where you could say go back and to a specific step and start over from that step, if that makes sense, instead of so it would have all of the previous context. It would get rid of any artifacts that had been created and sort of start back from that point. Do you think that concept would be useful for some of this replanning topic instead of
definitely? I think that's something I've thought about. I don't think this is necessarily relevant to the protocol, but it could be. There does seem to be this like orchestration layer that would be useful to kind of have some consistency about. So that could be like another part of the agent protocol is like the agent orchestrator protocol or something like that.
Right. Okay.
and then you could build all these kind of cool concepts in, and it would be great to see things like, tree of thoughts being able to be represented, and that people could reuse that, and it's just like a standard for example, tree of thoughts. It could be anything though.
Okay. So, moving on here, we've got a couple other things that we wanted to talk about, and I think we're about half an hour into the meeting, so I don't want to spend too much longer on some of this stuff, because a lot of it just needs to be put into an issue and talked about in great detail, as much as as we can, basically. There was a concept I wanted to talk about, which was in synchronizing the GitHub issues to the Discord. I wanted to do that, but I might just do that. It's not really something for discussion. There was the CLI that I'm working on. I was looking at names that are available in different packages, different repositories all over the place, and I checked the Ubuntu repository, the AUR, the Choco, and the Brew repositories, and I found one name that I thought would be cool, which is this APCs, is like Agent Protocol Client, something along those lines. I thought if that sounds good with anybody else, then I'll probably end up using that whenever we start getting into publishing things. So that's coming along pretty well. I've got, where you APC connect to the agent, and then APC create or task create, and then give it the arguments and stuff, so that hopefully we can get something going in a terminal for being able to create workflows and things like that. So hopefully that will come along pretty well, and then we can actually test it, and you can give me your feedback on that if it becomes useful for your workflow, or if not, then we'll find out. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about LangChain concept. I think HJ has some connectivity issues, but John, you had some. I think you were the one
Yeah,
working on
sorry
that.
for my microphone died.
Oh,
Yeah, mostly I switched to working on implementing the agent protocol because I want to dog food it while I'm building this to make sure it's working well. But basically, there's like a toolkit concept in LangChain, and that seemed to be the first thing I want to try. It gives agents the ability to call other agents.
right.
Now that I'm thinking about it, it may not work well because it does require an LLM to figure out what it's calling and when. So could be interesting. But I did also start on an agent executor, which is kind of the orchestration layer, which would just be I would either maybe implement. They have AutoGPT as an agent in there, so I may just try to implement something similar to AutoGPT using the protocol instead of local code. So the general idea is that LangChain would be calling out to some REST implementer of the agent protocol, and yeah, should be able to start working on it, and should be able to get some more information about it before next week.
Sounds good. Sounds good to me. Any amount of work that's being done on it is good, and especially as you're going through this, you're finding things that I think are going to help the protocol out a lot in the future. The concept of every issue that you found, pretty much, or even if they're only half an issue, there's still maybe gonna be an issue sometime. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the more people we have doing implementations, the better, and seeing examples will help a lot.
I think examples is the big thing that Steve-O's been asking for as well.
Yeah, I can. I'm hopefully done on my last week of work that I have to do for Microsoft to ship this Teams AI library I've been building. So I'm hopeful that after Halloween weekend coming up here, I can turn my attention back to my agent framework called AlphaWave, and I'll take a pass at implementing the protocol as well too on my side of things, and then that'll allow me to give more constructive feedback to the protocol and where I think it's lacking at.
Yeah, sounds good. And on that note, you had been talking about this bot framework emulator thing that you sent me, and
Yeah, I can show that very, very quickly.
yeah, if you wanted to throw that up there, I'd be happy to
Yeah.
take a look at it because I think I had mentioned that I wanted to create a VS Code extension or something along those lines, some kind of extension for that ecosystem that would be used, kind of like a dev tool kind of thing.
Yeah.
And this is what you sent me in response. Oh, you're streaming your Discord, not your stream.
Oh, I'm not.
Is
How do
that
I?
what I sound like? Hit your
Oh, I was streaming my desktop. I'm about to show it.
okay.
Hopefully, you
Well,
can
no,
look
no, no,
around.
no, no. You're just streaming your Discord.
Oh, how do I stream my desktop?
So
How do I share that?
go back to your Discord,
Okay.
and it should. There we go. So go to the little arrow in the middle button on the bottom there, and there's a little. Oh, so
Right.
whenever you hit start streaming, there's
Yeah.
there's two tabs. One says applications and one says screens,
Oh, I see.
and then you
Got
just
it.
hit the one that says screens.
Got it. Screen one. Yeah. Got it. Okay. All right. Sorry, I'm
No, it's no
not
biggie.
used to Discord.
It happens all the time. It's
Okay.
it's
All
like
right.
a
That's better,
Discord
right?
standard.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So let me pull this up very quickly. I want the Bot Framework Emulator. So anyway, I knew that you were working on a CLI tool. So I had proposed that one option, and you talked about doing a VS Code plugin,
That's right.
right? So the
I'd been
yeah,
thinking of building the plugin off of the CLI, similar to the way that I've
yeah,
seen some other tools do it. Like I think
yeah,
Prettify uses the actual Prettify command under the hood, and then just
right.
sort of visualizes that, and some other ones that are similar to that. But yeah,
Yeah.
so
So let me just run through this quick demo. We don't have a
yeah,
so I'm going to start a simple little Echo bot that I have
okay,
right in the Teams AI library. And so this is starting up a server that's running on port 3978, right? Okay. So we can come over here to the Bot Framework Emulator, and to communicate with this bot locally, this is basically a fork of VS Code from like VS Code 1, right? So it's like
yeah,
almost 8 years old now, or whatever this fork would be.
wow,
So it has no resemblance to VS Code anymore internally, right? But what's kind of cool about this emulator is that we can open up our bot here, and I can pick basically the endpoint that I want to connect to. Okay. And now this is speaking the bot framework protocol to that server that is running locally. So I can just say hello here. And you get like a whole chat experience in here, world, right? And we see all this is really doing is it's the Echo bot is just
okay,
saying back what I said, and it's basically incrementing the state counter. Now I don't know if this one is going to work from here, but this has some really nice features to it. So you can inspect basically, you see the entire like every post and message that's gone back and forth. You can click on any of these and you can inspect them and see where they're at conversationally. So I can click here and I can see the JSON payload that was sent. Here's the payload that got sent to the bot, and then here's the payload that got returned from the bot. And so it's really nice from an inspection perspective and
yeah,
just
that's
general
really
debugging.
cool.
Yeah, and it
So
has some other features here. So like if the bot is aware, and I don't believe this one is, you can start a conversation, a new conversation from a particular point in time. And it will
okay,
actually, it sends a command over to the bot telling it where it wants to roll back to state-wise, time-wise. So it's basically like you could time travel back. And so this has, it took like 5 people to build it, and we've spent years on it. So I was just saying that this is all open source. It's all on GitHub. We could theoretically fork this and try to get the agent protocol running under it.
Yeah, let me add this section to the notes here so that we can get some going on. I'm copying it from the last one that we had because there was some good stuff on there, and I can update
Get back
that.
to Discord here so that I can stop. I've got so many things open. All right.
This would be Bot Framework Emulator.
Yeah. I was thinking we could create it sort of called like agent emulator or something like that, right? It's been a while since I looked at the code for it, but if I can find in the code where there's an abstraction in there, there's a class in there that basically is used to talk the bot framework protocol. We should just need to replace that class, right, to get it to talk the agent protocol. Yeah. And I was just, it's a lot of UI that we could get for free, right? Yeah. And it's a whole conversation experience and has a bunch of those features with the inspectors and everything like that. So,
well, and on that concept, right? Because the one issue that I had with it was that it was its own client, and
yeah.
I'm not against downloading another client, but as much as it's still useful, I still feel like getting an extension or something for something that
I agree.
Worked in. So I wonder, what do you think about it, John? Is that concept, if it was agent protocol instead of the bot framework, would you use the tool? I think
I'm checking it out now. I'm interested enough to have just downloaded it, but I'm not sure. I mean, usually I'm trying to write code versus use other apps, but like, yeah, I was also thinking, I mean, this would just be a client that examples the protocol. Yeah, any more examples are going to be helpful.
Right.
Well, on a tool, right? So, like, yeah, I mean, there's no reason why there has to be one tool. This was, I think, something else I was bringing up to you, Zane. Is like, I'm not sure how much the foundation should be like. Okay, we have to build everything right. Long term, the foundation really should just be about defining protocols and then let an ecosystem evolve, right? And so this could be one of many tools that are in that ecosystem. What we have found, though, is that, like, for all of our bot developers, and we have thousands of them, that tool is the most indispensable thing in their arsenal, right? So they use that daily, right?
I'm sure that it also
debug. It's a debugger, right? So
I'm sure that it also would just help in general for people that are sort of switching from a bot framework ecosystem to agent protocol, and maybe help with the previous videos, tutorial material that's existed in the past and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm all for it. If you want to work on it, if you post the repository somewhere.
As I said, I was thinking about using it for my project anyway, so I could look at, and I'll tell you, like, I'm also invited to this Discord, a guy by the name of Ben Brown. He's currently a Microsoft employee, but prior to Microsoft, Ben was the creator of BotKit, the original Slack API.
Right. Yes.
And so Ben has agreed to come, and I think he's already joined the Discord. He couldn't make the meeting today, but he's planning to attend future.
He's the GOAT.
He's the GOAT.
Yes.
Yeah. Ben is awesome.
Yeah.
I told him what you guys were doing, and Ben's like, "Oh yeah, I'll come check it out. I'll help." And so, I mean, he's the one guy that's been building conversational experiences longer than I. And so,
cool.
As a side
original Slack guy. So,
or just to add to this, as a side effect of some of my LangChain work and also just working on my own app, I might try to make a like Next.js, just super trendy, easy example that is implementing or probably implements and then calls the agent calls itself in some recursive way. And then, yeah, there's going to be an example in the LangChain repository as well as their documentation. So hopefully that can get a little traction as well.
Nice.
And people get it.
What is your project, John? Your primary project that you're
Yeah, it's called waggledance.ai. I started it around the same time as AutoGPT. I'm a newcomer to this, as a lot of people are, and yeah, AutoGPT kind of inspired me. I was like, oh, there's something here.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've just been hacking on it a lot in the last few
Nice.
months.
Cool.
Nice. Yeah, I think several of us that AutoGPT heavily inspired me. So, but yeah,
So
there's definitely something here.
I added your tutorial use case thing into the list of tasks here. So if anybody is interested in helping with that in the future, then that could definitely be good, and we can follow up on that next week. And then Steve, I added your Bot Framework Emulator conversion in there as well.
Okay, great.
That little table. Is there anything else that we wanted to talk about? I think there's one last discussion with group topic here, which is from Steve-O, OpenAI's work towards their own agent framework. And did you want to talk about
Oh
that?
yeah. I was going to outline that. Basically, they have 80% of what they need to build their own agent protocol. It will be based off of their functions work. The thing that they don't have right now is any sort of stateful system, but I've heard rumors, and they're just rumors, that they have a stateful system coming. And so, it basically, they already do state and conversation management for ChatGPT, so they're just trying to basically, you can bet. And I don't work for them. I don't know anything. I don't have any super privileged information other than I've just heard rumors that
I mean, they've been moving in that direction behind the scenes. You could tell.
Yeah. It's obvious that they're moving that direction.
Well,
right,
one can only hope that they use the agent protocol. So we'll see what happens in the future.
Yeah. The thing that they won't have worked out is how to call down through a hierarchy of tasks. And so that's the thing that I think is kind of where all the tricky problems lie at is the scenario that I laid out earlier today, where I call John agent server, John calls your server to do tasks. That's where all of the tricky details are going to be at, right? But ultimately, I feel like that's where the agent protocol can offer the most value is in standardizing how all those hierarchical tasks coordinate with each other. So,
yeah, I agree.
Because whenever you get into this, I'm sure John's already figuring it out, right? It's all just task calling task, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah, it's turtles all the way down.
Exactly. It's turtles all the way down. That's where I landed at too. I originally had a concept of, top level agent had a bunch of tools that it was selecting, and I realized, oh, okay, well, the tools are just other agents, right? So it's turtles all the way down.
All right. Well, I think that covers this week's Agent Protocol meeting. Thanks for coming out, fellas. And
yeah, thanks.
We'll be back around next week for another one. There will be another voting in the session planning, most likely, because even though we have been sticking to Tuesdays at this time, I feel like keeping it flexible is somewhat good, so long as everybody's on board for that. Then we can continue doing it. Some people,
I would agree with that.
Yeah. So,
seems reasonable.
Have a great week, everybody.
Love all the beards. The meeting of the beards.
Right.